Hey everybody, this is Kat from Magoosh, and today I am thrilled to be talking with MedSchoolMilah. That's Milah Evans. She is a prospective OBGYN. It's just finishing med school, is about to begin residency. So that's a class of 2021. Her Instagram handle is MedSchoolMilah, and she is currently on the board of directors for the Student National Medical Association, which is the largest student-run minority medical nonprofit organization. And she has a passion for mentoring and helping other students find mentors with a focus on minority, underrepresented students. And we're going to be talking about some of her journey and some of her advice for those of you who are in the midst of it. So, hi, Milah. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Hi. Thank you for having me, Kat.
Oh, yeah, of course. So I said a little bit about you, but could you elaborate on your path into and maybe a little bit through med school?
Absolutely. So my name is Camila. I go by Milah on Instagram, but my full name is Camila. And I consider myself a non-traditional medical student, meaning I took some gap years, which is seeming to be a little bit more the norm. So I'm wondering in the future if that term can just be completely thrown away because it's something that should be normalized. And I think it's a really good way to reaffirm people's journeys, even if you're a gap year student or if you're a person that goes straight in. But yeah, I'm from Los Angeles, California, and I lived in Houston, Texas as well for a little bit. But I went to undergrad at Chapman University, which is known for its like performance arts, visual arts, acting, not really medicine. And so I would say the pre-med support on campus was very few and far between. And although I was taking pre-med classes, I was actually a sociology major, and I was trying to figure out if I wanted to be a doctor, if I wanted to pursue the kind of realm of doing like social work or going to get my master's in social work. And I realized that I didn't really know what I wanted to do once I got towards like my fourth year of college. And I just decided to rush into the MCAT because that's what everybody was doing. And I felt like, I felt like I was behind if I wasn't going to get it immediately. And let me just tell you, that is not how things should work. You should not just rush into taking the MCAT. I was actually kind of the generation that had the older MCAT. So different scoring, whole different thing. We didn't have those 3 extra sections of like the sociology and the psychology. We didn't have anything like that. But basically, I didn't do so well. I got, if I compared it to the equivalent of the new MCAT, like under 500. And so I took some time to figure out if this is really what I wanted to do because, to take that MCAT, it's a tough test to take. Took 3 years off and did work in the field that I thought I wanted to do in sociology. I did like some nonprofit prison recidivism work, gang violence work in Los Angeles. Absolutely loved it, but realized that there was still something missing. And I started volunteering at a hospital. And that's when I realized that, like, yes, I should probably continue to do this path. And it was kind of reaffirming for me. So I decided to apply to postbacks because I felt like my sciences and my foundation wasn't so strong. I did a 1-year GPA enhancer at Charles Drew University in Los Angeles. Ended up retaking the MCAT, of course, and ended up doing much better. Not extremely well, but it was definitely like a few points higher than my original and above a 500. So I felt confident enough to apply. And then I applied to a bunch of schools all over, and I got about like 6 or 8 acceptances. I can't remember now. It's been a while. A few with scholarships, and now, I accepted. Of course, I went to New York Medical College. And I've been here for 4 years. It has been great. And now I'm applying into OBGYN. And so I'm on the other side of this whole journey. And in about a week, I figure out where I'm going to be training for residency for match day. So that's a long synopsis of like my life in a very shortened kind of way. But yeah.
Yeah. And you hit on the really important point about the gap year becoming something that's very, very common. And so I know that Berkeley, I think it was 2 or 3 years ago for the first time, Berkeley undergrads who are applying to med school were more likely to take a gap year than not. And then I think it was just this year that nationally that became the trend. So, so it's, there's kind of this old archaic view that taking a year off means that you're somehow less valuable. And I really don't think that's, maybe it was the case at some point, but in my time as a pre-med teacher and advisor, I've never actually observed that. So I think it's mostly just kind of folklore.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm happy for it. I think, it's actually really beneficial to take some time off to make sure this is exactly what you want. And then, applying for med school and taking the MCAT and doing all these things while finishing off your last year, it's kind of hard. So
right. That's
I advocate for it if people want it.
That's right. Yeah. Yes. So what was the hardest part of the pre-med journey? So thinking of those years when you were getting into and applying for med school, what strikes you in retrospect as being the most difficult?
I think the hardest part was, for me, I had a really bad episode of burnout. And it was during my junior year, and I was taking a bunch of classes, trying to shove all my pre-med classes into like basically 1 year. So I was taking like physics, OChem, and I was a sociology major. So at that time I was writing my senior thesis, which is hard. I wrote like a 40-page paper. It was just a lot. So I think all of that together, along with like its labs and trying to study for the MCAT, I ended up burning myself out, and I didn't understand what that meant at the time. Now it's a lot more talked about. And so I think like people can understand what it means, but I just thought I was like, I just thought that, it had something wrong with me or that I couldn't handle the coursework. And I remember like 1 week, when you're in pre-med, you can't, one rule that is just known is that you are not allowed to miss any labs. So if you have an OChem lab, if you miss one, you're like almost failed the course. And I remember I just could not bring myself out of my bed to go to lab. And I like snuck away to my aunt's house for the weekend, and I told her like, oh yeah, I have the week off. I kind of like lied to her so that she wouldn't question me, because she of course knew I was in school. And I just remember just like sitting on her couch, and I could not leave. And I was like, what? I didn't know what the feeling was. And I knew that if I didn't get up and I didn't go to class, that it would have a really bad impact on my grade, but I physically could not move. And after that week, I was able to get back into it, but I realized that completely tanked my grades that semester, like all C's. And it just made me really realize how that one episode of burnout can completely like make you, it almost made me need to do a post-bac, because once you have a semester of all C's, it shows to the admissions committee what happened. Can you handle med school curriculum? And once I started getting educated on it and realizing that, like, okay, once you start seeing the signs, you need to take a step back, you need to talk to your professors, you need to communicate. Like, there's so many ways to combat it, but I did not know what that meant at the time. And it really affected the rest of my my application, trying to get in. And so I think the biggest thing that I think all pre-meds can do is recognize that it's not you being lazy. If you get to that point, please recognize your early signs and start talking to your science counselors and your science professors, and maybe even go get therapy or help, or just take a step back, eliminate yourself from your other commitments. Like at that point, I was doing a lot more than just my classes. I was like president of Black Student Union. I ran 2 like big centers on campus, the fitness center and the student union. I was like the student lead for both. So I was just doing a lot. And also I was working part-time at Victoria's Secret at the mall. So like clearly I was just spread way too thin, trying to do everything at once. And I realized that if I was going to do this med school journey, like I needed to back up from a few commitments and then focus my energy, because it's only so many hours in the day. And I think if I would have recognized that earlier, I wouldn't have had to like go through such a traumatic experience. Everything ended up working out for the best, though. I will have to say, like, if I didn't experience that burnout as an undergrad, I don't know what would have happened in medical school. Because now, the moment I get a hint of my burnout, I know exactly what to do. I know exactly how to handle it. And I have honestly said I haven't burned out yet in med school. And I
Oh,
was like,
that's
ooh,
awesome.
big learning lesson,
That was,
because
yeah, that was going to be my next question, actually, was has that helped you in med school? Have you faced a similar time in med school? Is med school different? I know that the students are so curious about that. And, it is so hard getting in. And one of the big
yeah,
questions, everyone knows about being a resident, being on your feet, but I don't think there's a lot of talk about med school itself and that
yeah.
experience. So do you feel like your burnout experience in undergrad, it sounds like it, ultimately helped you with med school?
Absolutely. I realized that no matter what's happening, there's always a way to make it work. And actually, if you communicate with your professors, if you go to a supportive school,
Mm-hmm.
they usually like find a way to help you out, especially if you can go to your academic support, like any academic support person on your campus, it's going to really be your person that's going to go to bat for you in these type of situations. I think just because now I realized how bad it can get, and like I
Yeah.
don't care how mandatory it is, I don't care if I fail, I just could not get up from my couch. Now I realize that I don't ever want to get there in med school. So
Mm-hmm.
I build in breaks in my curriculum myself so that I
Mm-hmm.
know that when I get back, I'm 100%. Because
That's
if
great.
I go into a new block, like let's say I just took a nephrology exam, and if I go the next day into neurology, like I cannot give anything. I'm just pouring from an
Yeah.
empty cup. And so I just learned how to like give myself time. And then actually when I do that, I end up performing better every single test. So I
Mm.
think people kind of mystify med school to be like, there's no time for anything. It's study, study,
Right.
study, study. There's nothing else. And that's just not true. I'm gonna just be
Right.
straight up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, there's absolutely time that's made, and there's a lot of breaks, and
Uh-huh.
take those breaks. Don't try to self-study in the middle of those breaks. Take your breaks because you need them to refuel, and
Mhm.
that really helps you go into the next block. Because I mean, once you're starting the next study section, it's like you got to
Mhm.
go and give yourself all your time and your energy in that. So
Mhm. Well, that's great. That's actually, it's inspirational to me. It's yeah, it took me a long time to learn how to really manage time and not push, push, push. It took me a long time to
yeah,
realize that sleep deprivation counted against me. I really thought I was going somewhere by skipping sleep. Um,
absolutely. I was the
yeah,
same way. I thought, oh, if I don't sleep, that means I'm really efficient, and that's
right.
not true.
Getting more work done. No, no,
No.
doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
So speaking specifically about your interest in representing minorities, minority advocacy, what are some of the struggles that you see underrepresented or non-traditional students facing? And what might be one thing students can keep in mind if they feel like they're coming from a place where they don't have as many resources or support or role models?
Yeah, absolutely. I come from a really specific background because actually both of my parents were physicians. So there was like a big hurdle that I think a lot of other minorities and underrepresented minorities in medicine I didn't have to face because I saw the what I could be in my parents because I
Yeah.
was like, okay, they are doctors. Unfortunately, my mom passed away. But even growing up with my mom before she passed away and my dad, the idea of what I could be never was out of my mind. And it wasn't something that I could never achieve. But I think what happens with a lot of people that are coming from low income backgrounds, people that are minorities, and specifically Black and Native Americans, who have the lowest number in
Mhm.
medicine, they just don't see themselves as
Right.
someone that can be in that role. And so that's why I think it's so important for people like me to show that they can do it and not do it in a way that's identifiable. I think sometimes when you
Mhm.
see minorities in medicine, it's like, well, you're just that genius minority. And
Yeah.
that's not
Yeah.
at all what you have to be in order to be a doctor. All you have to be is resilient and hardworking. Like,
Uh-huh.
that's the combination that gets you there. And of course, like, integrity and a good person, good people
Uh-huh.
person. But like,
Uh-huh.
in terms of what it takes to get in, you just have to be able to work hard and be
Mhm.
resilient and be able to bounce back when things
Mhm.
go wrong, because that is what's going to happen every single step of the journey. So I
Mhm.
think, first of all, just knowing that you can get there and that you can be that. The second thing is, if you don't know anybody in the community, in the medical community, you actually are like really it's really an uphill battle because you don't have letters of recommendation, you don't have people to
Mhm.
shadow, you don't have clinical experience, you don't have people just handing and saying, hey, you can just work in my medical office and you can count as shadowing hours, which is required for a medical school application. And I've seen how other people that have doctor parents, that are really involved in their child that wants to get into medical school, all they have to do is show up at dad's office and they have all of that squared away. And it is really
Mhm.
hard to get placed in the hospital. I remember like just cold emailing doctors, and they're just like, who are you? I don't know you. No. But if you
Yeah.
have someone that you know, they'll give you the strong letter of recommendation. They'll get you your shadowing hours. They'll be able to back up and really give your name to an admissions committee. Like that
Mhm.
stuff is so important. So I think
Mhm.
that actually the connection to medicine, as much as we want to say that it's all just about grades, it's not.
Right. That's
A
right.
lot of it has to do with getting those letters of rec. And if you don't know anybody in medicine, how are you going to get those
Yeah,
letters?
that's right.
Um,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so that's a big gap that I think
Uh-huh.
something that the Student National Medical Association, which is the board that I'm a part of, which is addressing these gaps and trying to understand the pipeline from high
Uh-huh.
school to college to post-bac to those gap year students like I was, to continue to push them through and not get them stuck in one place. And the
Mhm.
last thing, and I think the biggest hurdle, is money.
Mhm.
Money, money, money. Medical school applications are
Mhm.
so expensive. Um, Everything from even taking the MCAT, which is
Yeah.
expensive, and a lot of people take the MCAT more than once. So if
Right.
you're taking the MCAT two, three times, if you're doing an MCAT prep course, which is $2,000 each time,
Mhm.
if you are trying to, like, it's just a lot of money. And people that come from backgrounds where they can't just take off work and study
That's right.
for 6 weeks by
Yeah.
themselves. Like they have to continue working. And I've noticed when I was studying for the MCAT, I was able to say, Dad, can you just pay for my rent? So I pay until I take this MCAT and then I got you. I'll come back to work. A lot of people don't
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
that ability to do that. And so I would see friends that we would be studying, but they would be working part-time and now they never got into med school. Not saying
Mhm.
that it's impossible. It's just,
Mhm.
it is a uphill battle and all of these things really make
Mhm.
it difficult. So
Mhm.
scholarships are really important, affordable test prep, affordable ways to just get people through this uphill battle, which I'm saying is like just completely stacked against minorities and low income
Yeah.
students.
Yeah.
So
So, what specific advice would you have for a student who is in that position, say, beginning to study for the MCAT and is working a lot, or
yeah,
has maybe children?
yeah,
What have you seen to be effective approaches? Like thinking about
yeah.
people that you've talked to, how have they done it? What should they keep in mind?
So I think one thing to keep in mind is your timeline,
Hmm.
and who you have as your support system.
Hmm.
If you have a support system, rely and use. Like you just have to let
Hmm.
go of your ego at that point. So if that means that you gotta move in with mom so that you can study and someone can
Right.
watch the kids, like that is something that needs to happen for a certain amount of time so you can get what you need done.
Hmm.
If you're gonna be working part-time, I think you just have to expand your timeline. So like
Hmm.
if you're
That's
if
what
you're
I think.
working part-time, you just have to make sure that you're not on a 3-month plan, maybe
That's
you're on a
right.
year plan. And
Hmm.
yes, it's longer, but you will be able to do it. Like it's
Hmm.
definitely feasible. It's just a little bit longer of time,
Yes.
so that you can get your hours in. You can't shove it all in 3 months and thinking that you can work full time and study full time. It's just, I've seen
Hmm.
how that does not work. Now I'm sure there's superhumans out there, like God bless you, but I've seen how that really does not work for a lot of people. So just expanding your timeline,
Yeah.
and then I think if you talk to the people that you're working with, like, and telling them the situation you're in, sometimes they do give you 3, 4 weeks off just to study and are able to
Hmm.
cover you in that amount of time. So being transparent with your
Hmm.
boss, and then especially if you're doing like a post back or something, I know some people are saying like, I did a post back. I love my post back, but post back is very expensive, and you're not qualified for a lot of public loans because it's not a graduate program,
Yeah.
and that really discourages a lot of people. And they're just like, "Well, I'm not taking out loans for that." So, yes, that's hard, but I think
Yeah.
if you think about it, 1 year of loans to get you into med school is
That's
worth
right.
it
That's right.
if you need it. A lot of people don't
Yeah.
need it, but if you need it, I
Hmm.
absolutely encourage it.
Hmm.
There's other things like master's programs, which of course is graduate, but you're going to be that's a whole nother thing. We could talk all about masters versus
Yeah.
postbac versus linkage versus not. But
Right.
I think the
Right.
way to go is figuring out what program you need. And then if you have to work part-time, making sure that you're expanding your timelines, that you can get the same amount of work that everybody else is putting in just in a short amount of time, because you still need to
Mm-hmm.
put in the work, the questions, the studying, the office hours, all of that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
That's a bunch of really helpful tips. And I think what is really coming through is the importance of being transparent with other people, asking for help, communicating with college advisors, with professors, with employers, what your situation is, and that there's nothing you don't have to hide. If anything, hiding is going to probably count against you. There's support
Exactly.
out there, and it's very
Exactly.
okay to describe what your situation is. It actually
Absolutely.
is a way of taking responsibility. I think sometimes people feel like, oh, I'm complaining or other people are doing it, but it is taking responsibility to communicate what's going on for you.
And I mean, even, when I was in my postbac and I was like, I have this job, but I really want to work in research. But I don't, I can't do research for free. My dean was able to like put together and find a research package for me so that I can work on campus, do research and get paid, and let go one of my jobs that really did not help with me getting into medical school. So like being communicative about what you need, even in that realm, like
Yeah.
there's ways. So, like you said, being transparent and honest
Mm-hmm.
actually
Mm-hmm.
opens up more doors than you ever could have thought was possible,
Yeah,
depending on what resources the schools you're going to have.
that's right. So going back to the MCAT, you said that you took the old version, the one that was
Yes.
had a lot more physics and organic and no social science.
Yes. Yes.
What was one of the most helpful or useful things you did as part of your MCAT prep that you would recommend to students today? Because what I notice is a lot of students kind of, it takes a while to kind of find your rhythm and to kind of get used to the test and get into a study system that's effective. And I'm just wondering if there was anything that you landed upon along the way where in
Yeah.
retrospect, which you would have done right away.
Oh my gosh, so many things. Like I write so many blog posts on these subjects, and I think test prep is something that I've gotten so much better at actually in medical school. I remember looking at a chart that really discouraged me that said
Mm.
the same. There was a correlation about like your SAT and your MCAT and then your
Yeah.
USMLE step one, and saying that what you get is going to be the same across the board, and people don't really jump percentiles.
Oh, it said
And
that. Usually, actually, I say that's usually not the case. MCAT is so
yeah,
different. Yeah,
that's
yeah.
what, so I remember reading that as an MCAT person being like, well, I did terribly on my SAT, like very, very average. I
Uh-huh.
think even below average. And then my MCAT, of course, I got below average the first time. So I remember
Mhm.
thinking like, is this going to be my trajectory throughout my entire career? I'm just below
Mm.
average for everything because that's the percentile changes. And I realized that that's not my reality. Okay, I've been
Mhm.
able to jump percentiles every
Right.
single step to now, like as I ended up my year, I got like an insane percentile that I never thought I could because I mastered the basics
That's
of
awesome.
how to take tests. And so I
Yeah.
think if I could do it all over at MCAT all over again, knowing what I know now, it would be like two or three things. One thing is learning and understanding test anxiety because that's something that I
Mhm.
had.
Mhm.
And I remember taking my first MCAT, I literally was like shaking and had a full panic attack before I started my exam. And I was in the room, like, and I was able to breathe it out, but I mean, those nerves were still there. So I was in a
Yeah.
fight or flight response. And when you're in fight or flight, you can't really think, you can't really do much. So just understanding what test anxiety is and how and different techniques, which I talk a lot about on my blog, but
Great.
yeah, so learning test anxiety. And then number two is incorporating practice questions and practice tests from day
Mhm.
one.
Mhm.
I think sometimes people think, oh, I got to learn all this content.
That's
And
right.
like, once I learn all the content, then I'll do questions, then I'll do practice tests.
That's
And
what people do.
yeah, and I think that is not the way to do it.
Yeah.
For me, I don't know
Mhm.
how,
Mhm.
this is my personal experience. I think I've learned that incorporating questions as early as possible is going to be the way
Mhm.
that you master the exam. And
Right.
so, even if that means that you first start off with a subject, if you can do 5 questions that day and increase it every single day to where you are not only learning content, but you're doing questions at the same time to a point where you're getting to a pretty good number, 20 to 40 a day,
Mm-hmm.
That is going to take you so much farther than trying to memorize content and then go to questions and
Yeah.
practice tests and then incorporating practice tests. Not saying that, of course, they are going to show you where you are and your knowledge, but they're actually really good learning tools.
They
Because if you
are.
do practice tests a bunch and bunch and bunch, once you get to the MCAT, it's like another test. I remember when I took step 2, which was your last board exam for medical school, I literally walked in there feeling like I've done this literally so many times.
Mm-hmm.
And I did not have that feeling I had when I walked into the
Mm.
MCAT. And I was like,
Mm.
this is just a totally different person. And I suffered terribly from test anxiety.
Oh,
So practice tests, practice questions,
right.
mastering your test anxiety, and and then group study sessions, I think
Uh-huh.
are,
That's a good
uh,
one.
they really, first of all, just because sometimes you feel really alone on this MCAT journey. The second time I took it, I didn't take a course with it. I just took it by myself. So I was just in a coffee shop every day, 12 hours a day. Like, it's tough. But every
Mm-hmm.
Saturday, I would really look forward to going with my other post-bac friends. It was a group of 3 or 4 of us. We would do a practice test Friday, and then we review it together
Mm.
Saturday.
Mm.
And it was a way for us to kind of learn from each other, have laugh and bond. Sometimes we would talk a little bit too much, but it's what you need when you're alone for so
Yeah.
long and you feel like you really get isolated, and it's not a good feeling sometimes. And
Mm-hmm.
so I did that a lot during my step 1 and my step 2, which are your board exams in medical school. And every Wednesday we would study together. It just really helps. So I know in the pandemic it's kind of hard, but I've seen a lot of people doing like study sessions over Zoom, silent study sessions. Even if you can go, like, places are opening up here in New York. So if there's a coffee
Yeah.
shop that's open that's social distance, have 1 or 2 people go with you and y'all review a practice test or review a set of 20 sets of questions. And that
Mm-hmm.
really does bring the journey all together, and it just makes it a little bit less miserable, because I'm not gonna lie, it is tough, very
Right.
tough.
Right.
So
Right. And sometimes the last thing you want to do after you've taken a full-length practice test is review all your answers and look at all the
exactly,
mistakes. Yeah, that's
exactly.
I
So
really like that system, that structure.
thank you.
Well, we have hit on a bunch of great things. I've been thrilled to hear your insight and your experience, and you're very inspirational.
Thank
Um,
you.
if there's, I guess there's one question I like to ask at the end of interviews, and that's, what's the best piece of advice you received either in your pre-med stage or in med school that meant a lot to you, that's really like left its imprint, that you would like to pass
Mm,
on to our followers?
I think something that really helps me is knowing that there are people that have thousands and thousands and thousands of people that have done it before you, and there's going to
Mm-hmm.
be thousands and thousands of people that have done it after you.
Uh-huh.
And so sometimes you just feel like there's no way I could do this. There's no way. And you just get really like down on yourself because you're like, this is
Yeah.
impossible. But it's
Yeah.
not. It's not
Right.
impossible. It's hard. And that's exactly what it is. It's hard. And every level it's going to get harder and harder and harder, but it's
Mm-hmm.
not impossible. And
Mm-hmm.
so looking at people that you can identify with,
Mm.
social media to me is something I never had. Like when we were in college, like social media was like you posting group pics at like at the
Yeah.
game. Like it wasn't anything like what it is now, influencing all these things. And
Right.
so I say take advantage of that. Go on Twitter, go on Instagram,
Mm-hmm.
go and look at people's blogs and figure out who they identify with, and
Mm-hmm.
understand that if they can do it, you can do it. Ask how they
Right.
did it. I mean, I am like such an open person, and that's why I do like my weekly questions where people
Mm.
can just ask me anything. And I try to make sure that people know that I was just like them. I'm not this
Great.
super smart person that loves science and physics since I was a child. Nothing like that. I just knew that I loved what doctors do and how they influence change.
Mm.
And I wanted to be that. And I knew I was hardworking. That's like
Mm-hmm.
the only thing I can really identify in terms of going to medical school. All the other things, I didn't really fit into pre-med culture. I didn't have a lot
Mm-hmm.
of pre-med friends. I just felt super like outcasted, but I knew I could do it because it's not impossible. And when someone said that to me, I was like, all right, so if it's not impossible, then what I got to do to make it happen?
Yeah.
So
Right.
I just want to let everyone know that you absolutely can do it, and you don't need to be a certain type of person to like make med school work or getting into med school work. Yes,
Mm.
it's hard, but that is absolutely expected.
Uh-huh. That's
So,
that's really a joy to hear your perspective.
of course.
Um, is there anything else you'd like to add or questions for me before we wrap up?
No, I think that's it. I'm really glad I was able to talk, and I know that a lot of the people on my platform have loved Magoosh, so I hope
Great.
this helps everyone. And if y'all
Mhm.
have any questions, feel free to DM me. You know, match day's coming up, so we'll see where I end
Right.
up. And once I start the OBGYN journey, I will hopefully start to share that part of my life as well. So
Okay. Well, I'm going to be really interested. I'm going to be
thank
keeping an eye
you.
on your updates and what you wind up doing. I'm sure you're going to have a fantastic career.
Thank you so much.